Inside the historic walls of the Hotel de Beauvau, the beating heart of France's interior ministry, Bruno Retailleau takes his seat at the head of the crisis table. The cameras capture the formality, but the atmosphere is tense. This is no ordinary gathering. It is an emergency interministerial meeting convened as France reels from nationwide protests that have disrupted public life on an unprecedented scale. At his side sits Philippe Gustin, the Prime Minister's newly appointed cabinet director. Their quiet exchanges at the opening moments reflect the urgency of the hour. Outside, the streets are alive with anger. Hundreds of thousands marching, chanting and striking against President Emmanuel Macron's proposed austerity measures. The government finds itself cornered, deliver on fiscal promises or respond to a nation that feels betrayed. Attendees file into the room, each portfolio carrying its own burden. Violaine Desmarais, the president's trusted advisor on security and home affairs, listens intently. Elizabeth Bourne, former Prime Minister and now Education Minister, bears the weight of shuttered classrooms across the country. Catherine Vautrin, Minister of Labour, Health, Solidarity and Families, faces an avalanche of unrest from workers, unions and citizens alarmed by cuts to pensions and healthcare. The visual tableau is unmistakable. A cabinet forced into collective crisis management, its authority tested in real time. Retailleau begins to speak. His tone is calm, deliberate, but the stakes are clear. France, he insists, cannot show weakness. At a moment when markets watch nervously, when European partners measure every move, projecting control becomes as critical as restoring calm in the streets. Yet behind the formality lies a harsher truth. Ministers grappling with the limits of governance, caught between policy and protest. The COGIC, France's Interministerial Crisis Centre, is where the nation turns in moments of disaster, terror attacks, natural catastrophes or national emergencies. Today, the crisis is political. The battle is over austerity, but the consequences extend far beyond budgets. France is divided, its social fabric strained, and its government challenged to reassert authority without igniting further unrest. The protests began with fury at Macron's announcement, sweeping austerity designed to rein in France's mounting deficit. A freeze on public sector hiring, cuts to pensions, reductions in healthcare funding. Macron argued these were necessary sacrifices to secure the country's economic future, to reassure international partners and stabilise debt. But in the eyes of millions, the measures struck at the heart of France's social contract, the very promise of protection, stability and dignity for ordinary citizens. In Paris, train stations went silent as rail workers joined the marches. Teachers locked classrooms and carried placards instead. Garbage collectors piled waste in defiance, the refuse itself turning into symbols of political decay. From Lyon to Marseille, the rallies drew comparisons to the Yellow Vest movement, a reminder of the explosive potential of French protest culture. Only this time, it was not a tax revolt, but a rebellion against austerity itself. Inside Beauvau, the debate is as intense as the scenes outside. Ministers weigh risks and trade-offs. The Interior Ministry warns of radical elements hijacking the marches, pointing to incidents of violence and vandalism in certain cities. Economic advisers caution that backtracking on austerity could spark market turmoil, raising borrowing costs and undermining France's credibility in Europe. The dilemma is stark: pursue fiscal discipline and risk social upheaval, or concede to popular pressure and face international scrutiny. For Bruno Retailleau, the challenge is especially sharp. Known for his law and order politics, he must now contain protests without fueling accusations of repression. Already, police tactics are under fire. Images of baton charges and tear gas in Paris and Lyon have drawn criticism from opposition leaders and human rights groups. Supporters counter that firmness is essential, that the state must not yield to disruption. Every choice, every order becomes a political gamble. The reverberations extend far beyond France's borders. Germany, facing its own fiscal pressures, watches Macron's austerity experiment closely. In Brussels, EU officials quietly admit they are nervous. If France, the Eurozone's second largest economy, falters in its bid for reform, the ripple effects could destabilise the bloc. Meanwhile, unions in Spain, Italy and Belgium have voiced solidarity with French workers, describing the protests as part of a larger European struggle against austerity. Yet for many French citizens, the crisis is not abstract economics. It is deeply personal. Pension reforms mean working years longer for less security. Healthcare cuts mean longer waits and fewer services. For workers already strained by inflation and inequality, Macron's policies feel like punishment. Protest chants echo with accusations of betrayal, that the president who once promised renewal is now dismantling the very protections that gave French society its identity. As the interministerial team studies briefing papers, France braces for more disruption. The SNCF rail network warns of continued shutdowns. Airlines prepare for flight cancellations. School unions vow rolling strikes. Hospitals already stretched thin face staff walkouts. Austerity, once an economic debate, has erupted into a full-fledged national fault line with no immediate end in sight. Bruno Retailleau's task is unenviable: to reassure a restless nation, to restore calm in the streets, and to defend a president's vision of fiscal responsibility, all without igniting greater unrest. For Macron, the gamble is historic. Austerity may stabilise France's economy, but it risks destabilising its politics. And as this crisis unit meeting shows, the government is bracing for a long fight, one that pits budgetary arithmetic against the very principles of liberty, equality and fraternity. The outcome is uncertain, but the urgency is undeniable. The voices outside grow louder, the ministers inside deliberate, and France stands at a crossroads between austerity and upheaval, between promises and protests, between the demands of Europe and the defiance of its people.
Bien, la journée n'est pas achevée, il y a encore un certain nombre de places de la nation notamment, mais on va faire un point déjà. Ce que je souhaite, c'est que les uns et les autres puissiez